So joining us now, Republican Senator from Kansas, Roger Marshall. Good to have you with us on Fox News Sunday.
Jenna, great to be with you.
So let's start with this free speech debate. I want to play a little bit more of what the FCC chair had to say and a little bit more of Senator Cruz as well.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
And I got to say, that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
And he's not the only Republican senator who's expressing concerns about the optics of this and also about it potentially being used against conservatives in the future. What do you make of it?
Well, Shannon, I just want to remind everybody this is a public broadcast station, and they serve the public interest. So the FCC has a responsibility to call balls and strike. I think back to the Super Bowl when Janet Jackson had a wardrobe malfunction and she was slapped. I think the FCC is just saying, look, you have a public interest. You're flirting with what's right and wrong here. Maybe you need to take it down a notch. The FCC didn't fire him. He was fired because he was ignorant that he had inflammatory remarks, bad ratings, those types of things.
So the Washington Post writes this, an opinion piece. They say one person's dissent is another person's hate speech. And once you start prescribing limits on language and ideology, then anyone with power is free to do the same, including, inevitably, ignorant people who find themselves in control of government. This conversation about hate speech, you then have to get to who defines it and how they define it. Do you worry that there will be a pendulum swing back against conservatives with this issue?
It's possible, but again, on a podcast, on a cable news station, you can have this type of rhetoric, but not on a public broadcast station. That they're given a certain bandwidth there to serve the public as well. So I think the FCC has a responsibility. Eventually, this ends up in the Supreme Court, and even just going back to the Janet Jackson case, the courts are up and down, yes and no on it, and a split decisions.
Well, the Supreme Court is very protective of the First Amendment, so we'll see if any of these conversations and current disputes get there. Meanwhile, I want to ask you about some other disputes on Capitol Hill. You were part of a hearing this week with former CDC head Susan Monarez. She said that she was forced out because she wouldn't give preemptive approval to something, vaccine recommendations, when she hadn't seen yet the underlying documentation on that. And also that she was being pressured to fire people without cause. She worried about the politicization of the CDC, which Republicans have been worried about, and they were during COVID. So what do you make of what you heard and her accusations at that hearing this week?
Yeah, I think I want to say at the higher level. Look, Secretary Kennedy's goal is to bring back trust and faith in the CDC. And unfortunately, Dr. Monarez continues to take that the wrong way. She continues to refuse that the COVID shots don't help young adults, that the benefits don't outweigh the risks. Even in that meeting, she proved that she was not going to go along with Secretary Kennedy's goals here. She doesn't realize that the CDC is the responsibility. When you tell a mom with no risk factors, a negative hepatitis screen, that their one-day-old baby needs a hepatitis shot, moms don't trust the CDC. When the CDC tells a mom your baby needs 76 jabs before they're old enough to vote, the moms don't agree with that. Look, not every person needs every vaccine. It really comes down that Dr. Monarez wants to go in a different direction than Secretary Kennedy does, and that simply wasn't working out.
Sounds like he may be called back before the committee. If he is, what questions do you have based on what she said?
Look, I hope we can move on beyond vaccines. Vaccines are 1/10 to 1% what we should be focused on. I want to ask him, how do we build up our own immunity so when we do get viruses like COVID, and we probably each have had COVID 5 or 10 times, we're developing natural immunity, but what can we do to address this chronic disease epidemic? 70% of Americans with a chronic disease, 40% of our children with a chronic disease, 20% of our children on some type of a prescription drug. So I hope we can move on beyond vaccines and talk about the big pictures, how we make America healthy again.
Do you worry, though, that there will be parents who rightfully so have questions and skepticism, and they worry there's not been a lot of transparency? And I know that you think the CDC of past has been in part to blame for that. But things that we've eradicated, like polio, like, mumps, measles, those things that are basically under control, do you worry that enough parents will say, I'm going to push back on this because now I don't have confidence in the CDC, and she's trying to avoid that perception, or she was when she was heading CDC?
So we're exactly trying to do that. We're trying to address that mom's concerns by seeing this open debate over these vaccines. Look, I believe in the polio vaccination. I've raised money for it. I believe in the MMR vaccine. But in this case, the ACIP panel determined that adding varicella chickenpox to this increases febrile seizures. Did anyone tell the moms that there was increased risk of a febrile seizure for their child getting these MMR with the varicella. If we space them out, the risk goes down. So I think it'll take a while, but I believe in parents. I believe in the doctor. I believe in the parent-doctor relationship that they can communicate all these issues through.
So you got this looming issue of potentially a government shutdown. The Senate voted down the one possibility or a couple of possibilities that were floating out there. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says you've got to move forward with tax credits that made health insurance coverage more affordable. Here's a bit of what he says.
Premiums are set to go through the roof. Hundreds of dollars each month, thousands of dollars each year. Republicans say, let's put it off. Let's do it later. But for Republicans, later means never.
So we're talking about the extension of tax credits that made Obamacare subsidies more affordable for people that need coverage. You're a physician. You know the astronomical cost of health insurance, of health care. So what about this point that, thousands, maybe millions of families are going to be affected if you don't address this issue, whether you do it in a CR or somewhere else?
Yeah, so the Democrats' solution to every problem is to throw more money at it. They want to borrow another $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years at these particular problems, instead of addressing the real roots. What I'm focused on this round of Congress is more transparency, forcing every hospital, imaging center, surgery center to show patients the price tag before they have the surgery done, along with expanding HSAs where they can use pre-tax dollars and turn them into consumers again. Look, the goal of the Republicans here is very clear. We want to keep the government open and work towards a balanced, responsible budget. My friends across the aisle, they want to add $1.5 trillion to the budget. This is really asking them to extend Joe Biden's budget. That's what these numbers are. This is very consistent with their budget. I hope you ask the Democrats, you voted for this same spending bill last December. Why are you against it now?
We'll get some answers, hopefully, for you on that. And September 30th is coming. The American people hope you guys find a way to walk through this. Okay, Senator, thank you for coming in. Good to have you.
Thank you, Shannon.